Fictional story assuming a 2024 March Madness matchup between Florida Atlantic University and Northwestern University. The madness begins. The early spring air was electric with anticipation as the NCAA March Madness tournament kicked off. After fighting through tough conference tournaments, 68 teams had earned their spot in the Big Dance, each one dreaming of cutting down the nets in Houston at the Final Four. Among those teams were the Florida Atlantic Owls and the Northwestern Wildcats, two programs looking to etch their names in the history books by making an unforgettable run. Florida Atlantic was coming off one of their best seasons ever, having won the Conference USA regular season and tournament titles. Leading scorer John L. Davis had been nearly unstoppable, averaging 22 points per game. The explosive 6 feet 4 inches senior guard could get a bucket from anywhere on the court. The Owls also boasted a stifling defense, holding teams to just 63 points per game. That defensive intensity was spearheaded by junior forward Giancarlo Rosado, who led the nation with 3.2 blocks per contest while also pulling down 9 rebounds per game. Head coach Dusty May had instilled a blue-collar mentality in his squad. After serving as an assistant for over 15 years, the 38-year-old was in just his third season as a head coach but had FAU playing their best basketball in decades. "We're just a hungry group that has been disrespected for too long," May said. "These guys play with a tremendous chip on their shoulders. We're coming to win, not just happy to be here." As for Northwestern, they had embraced the underrated moniker throughout a dream season that saw them win 26 games and earn a 6th seed after sharing the Big Ten regular season title with Purdue and Indiana. Leading that charge was senior point guard Drew Timmerman, who orchestrated the Wildcats' efficient offense that ranked top 10 nationally in assists per game. Timmerman had been an unheralded recruit coming out of high school, but over 4 years had developed into one of the top floor generals in the country through his brilliant decision-making and tremendous court vision. His 7.5 assists per game had him near the top of the national leaderboards. "Drew just makes everyone around him better," said Northwestern head coach Kristen Parker. "He puts the ball on a string and creates easy opportunities for our scorers to shine." The Wildcats' top scorer was junior Simeon Mitchell, who averaged 17 points per game through his slick mid-range game and ability to generate contact. The 6 feet 6 inches wing routinely got to the free throw line double-digit times per contest. When Mitchell got going, he was almost impossible to stop. Parker was in her 5th season in Evanston after leading Florida State to back-to-back Elite Eight runs. Now 39 years old, she had transformed Northwestern from a perennial underachiever into a Big Ten powerhouse through her intense focus on discipline and accountability. "We've gained a lot of respect this season, but we have so much more to prove," Parker stated. "This team expects to be playing deep into March and April. We aren't just happy to make the tournament, that's the standard now." The two squads had earned their way to the West Regional semifinals in Las Vegas for what was sure to be an epic Sweet 16 showdown. Sitting in first place and third place respectively in the NCAA's adjusted defensive efficiency ratings, the matchup promised to be an intense, hard-nosed battle. Survive and advance. The lights shone bright as the teams took the floor at T-Mobile Arena on the Vegas Strip for their Sweet 16 matchup. A raucous capacity crowd was split down the middle between the blue and red of FAU and the purple of Northwestern. From the opening tip, the defensive intensity was turned up to the max. The Owls employed their trademark full-court press, hounding the Wildcats as they tried to initiate their offense while FAU's aggressive trapping created deflections and turnovers. However, Northwestern managed to weather the early storm by freelancing through Timmerman. The savvy senior calmly broke the press time and again, finding open teammates for easy looks before the defense could get set. When Florida Atlantic overcompensated by extending too far, he took advantage by slashing into open lanes for a few acrobatic finishes at the rim himself. On the other end, the Wildcats doubled the post any time Rosado got a touch, trying to force the big man to become a passer rather than let him go to work on the block. While this limited his scoring output, Rosado was unselfish in reversing the ball to open shooters for kick-out threes. The three-point shooting from Florida Atlantic kept them within striking distance as the two teams went back and forth, trading blows throughout an intense first half. Mitchell provided a spark for Northwestern off the bench, scoring 11 quick points by relentlessly attacking the cup before picking up his second foul. The game was knotted at 32-32 heading into the locker rooms after a defense-oriented slugfest in the opening 20 minutes. In a blink of an eye during the second half, everything changed. Coming out of the break, both teams went ice cold for a 6-minute stretch where neither squad could buy a bucket. That set the stage for Davis to finally catch fire after being held scoreless before halftime. The senior sharpshooter knocked down 4 triples in a span of 3 minutes, single-handedly staking the Owls to a 44-35 lead. From there, FAU's defensive pressure seemed to intensify as they fed off their home crowd's energy, forcing turnover after turnover and getting out in transition. An 11-0 run made it 55-35 with just over 10 minutes remaining. Down but not out, the experienced Wildcats refused to go quietly. Parker called a timeout to settle her team down and they responded by methodically chipping away at the deficit through their half-court execution. Timmerman took over as the floor general, making all the right reads to keep the Florida Atlantic defense off balance while Mitchell got hot again, this time from beyond the arc by burying 3 triples. A 16-4 spurt trimmed the margin down to 59-51 at the under 8 media timeout. The Northwestern full-court press then started causing disruption, as the Owls became flustered and struggled to get into their offensive sets. Their frustration was compounded by foul trouble, as both Rosado and Davis were carrying 4 fouls with over 5 minutes left. With the game hanging in the balance, it came down to a final 3-minute stretch where the lead changed hands 3 times amid a frenetic sequence of big buckets, defensive stops and jaw-dropping plays from both sides. Davis fouled out after receiving a controversial charging call while attacking the rack in transition with 2:30 left and FAU clinging to a 67-66 lead. Northwestern immediately capitalized with a Timmerman drive and dish to Mitchell for a go-ahead 3 on the ensuing possession, putting the Wildcats up 69-67. May erupted on the sideline in protest of the call on Davis and was whistled for a technical foul. But instead of extending the Northwestern lead, Parker elected to put her best free throw shooter Jordan Spellman at the line instead of allowing Timmerman to shoot the penalty shots. That decision proved fortuitous as Spellman split the pair, making it just 70-67. Florida Atlantic then tied the game at 70 on their next trip down courtesy of a huge 3 by senior wing Connor Harris. The final minute was truly March Madness personified. With 48 seconds left, Timmerman was trapped by FAU's press but alertly fired a tight window pass to Spellman cutting to the basket for a thunderous dunk and a 72-70 Northwestern edge. Now trailing with time winding down, May rolled the dice and called for a double team on Timmerman to try and force a turnover. It worked as Rosado arrived just in time to cleanly reject the trapped point guard and start a break the other way. The Owls pushed ahead and found gunner Keenan Bulut alone in the right corner for a potential go-ahead 3. His attempt hit back iron, but Rosado pursued the offensive rebound and put it back in while getting hacked across the arms. He calmly drained the free throw to convert an old-fashioned 3-point play, giving FAU a 73-72 advantage with 14 seconds left. With no timeouts remaining, Parker elected not to call a timeout to set up a final play, trusting her veteran backcourt. Timmerman probed off the inbounds pass but couldn't find an opening against the Owls' stingy set defense. He eventually swung it to Mitchell on the wing, but the junior's desperation triple fell woefully short and the Northwestern bench could only look on in anguish as FAU's players celebrated an epic nail-biting victory right in front of them. Davis finished with 17 points despite his foul trouble while Rosado had 10 points, 8 boards, and 4 blocks in the gritty win. Mitchell's 22 points led Northwestern while Timmerman contributed 12 points and 9 assists, but it wasn't quite enough. "What a fight by both teams, that's what March is all about," said May in the post-game. "I'm so proud of our resiliency and toughness to gut that one out down the stretch. Obviously we're crushed to see our season end just short of the Elite Eight," Park stated somberly. "But this group represented Northwestern with class and passion every single night. We gave it everything we had until the final buzzer. The team to beat." Fresh off that heart-pounding Sweet 16 thriller, Florida Atlantic had the difficult task of preparing for a rematch from earlier in the season against Big 12 powerhouse Kansas just 2 days later. Back in November, the then unranked Owls had pulled off a 67-61 home upset over the 5th-ranked Jayhawks in one of the biggest wins in program history. Davis had gone for 28 points in that one, while Rosado was dominant inside with 18 points and 12 boards against Kansas' formidable front court. This time around, FAU caught a break as the Jayhawks were short-handed following a lower leg injury to star senior forward Jair Boston in their Sweet 16 win over UCLA. The 6 feet 8 inches Boston had been one of the most productive players in the nation, averaging 17 points and 10 rebounds per game. Without their go-to scorer inside, Kansas had to rely more heavily on their perimeter trio of Trent Goff, Markin Ruffin, and Caleb Brown. The three guards combined for over 40 points per contest and each could take over offensively when they got hot from deep. While Boston's injury was a huge loss, head coach Lance Chavez's squad still had one of the most imposing defensive units in the country, led by point guard Ruffin. The 6 feet 3 inches senior was a two-time Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, utilizing his length and anticipation to routinely make life miserable for opposing backcourts. So while Florida Atlantic was happy to not have to deal with Boston's brute interior force, they knew their veteran backcourt of Davis and Harris would have their hands full trying to navigate the disruptive Kansas defense. "Ruffin is a nightmare on that end," Davis said in the lead-up. "He's got incredibly quick hands and never lets you breathe with his ball pressure. It'll be a huge challenge but we relish that test." For May and the Owls, their NCAA tournament journey had taken them from a hard-fought opening round win over College of Charleston to capturing the nation's attention with their gritty showing against Northwestern. Now they had to take the next step up in class and prove themselves against one of the true blue bloods in Kansas. A spot in the Final Four was within their grasp as they embraced the opportunity. "This group believes we can play with anyone in the country," May stated matter-of-factly. "We've got veteran leadership, toughness in the trenches, and a killer instinct unlike anything I've been around. I wouldn't want to be in the ring with anyone else." When the Elite Eight matchup tipped off, Florida Atlantic made an immediate statement by imposing their frenetic defensive tempo to start the game. Rosado swatted away a Brown layup attempt in the opening minute, then Bullitt came up with a steal that he finished with an acrobatic finger roll. A three by Harris extended the lead to 7-0 before Kansas could even set their offense. The Owls kept swarming on that end, extending their pressure out to half-court and mucking up the Jayhawks' offensive flow before it could begin. Kansas looked flustered as turnovers piled up from the sheer ball pressure and physicality. Meanwhile, FAU seemed to have fresh legs and scored effectively in transition with Davis and Bullitt regularly leaking out for early runouts. When Kansas did finally manage to set their half-court defense, Florida Atlantic attacked relentlessly by crashing the offensive glass and creating second-chance opportunities. Just over 10 minutes into the contest, the Owls were already in the bonus and took a commanding 28-11 lead following Rosado's three-point play in the paint. Chavez was forced to burn 2 early timeouts to stem the bleeding, with Kansas looking increasingly desperate and unable to settle into any kind of rhythm or flow. It appeared Florida Atlantic was well on their way to cruising into the Final Four when Kansas finally made their push. Ruffin and fellow guard Goff combined for 5 steals in the span of 3 minutes. The Jayhawks ramped up their own pressure to force 9 straight empty FAU possessions as the momentum swung violently in their favor out of nowhere. On the offensive end, Brown found his outside stroke by hitting 3 triples during a game-changing 18-0 run. That scoring burst vaulted Kansas ahead 29-28 with just over 3 minutes left in the first half. After a slow start, they had clearly found their groove and Kansas rode that wave to carry a 36-32 lead into the locker room. The second half developed into a classic March Madness slugfest between two battle-tested heavyweights trading haymakers. Whenever it looked like one team was seizing control, the other responded with a huge basket or defensive stand. Davis, Harris, and Bullitt all took turns carrying the scoring load for FAU as they refused to go away. The senior trio combined for all 39 second-half Owls points. Kansas, meanwhile, got major lifts from their role players off the bench. Reserve center Daniel Beard scored a crucial 6 points during a 4-minute stretch to counter Rosado's dominance inside, while guard Caden Collins knocked down multiple momentum-swinging triples to keep FAU at bay. Down 68-66 with 1:16 left, Davis put his team ahead by drilling an off-the-dribble triple over the outstretched arms of Ruffin in one of the biggest shots of his decorated career. Ruffin responded by calmly burying 2 free throws to knot the score at 69 with 33 ticks left. Out of a timeout, May deployed one final creative set play as FAU looked to earn one last shot for the win. The Owls crisply moved the ball around the perimeter before Harris skipped a pass into Rosado at the nail. Sensing the double incoming from Beard and rim-protecting forward Arman Yilmaz, Rosado calmly kicked it out to Davis for one final look at glory at the top of the key. With the clock winding down, the 6 feet 4 inches sharpshooter rose up uncontested and drained the cold-blooded 3-ball as the roar of the partisan Florida Atlantic crowd exploded all around him. 72-69. Davis threw his arms skyward in celebration as his teammates mobbed him from the bench with pure pandemonium. A timeout was called, but it did little to quell the chaos and delirious joy around the Owls' huddle. Redemption was within reach, but they still had to sweat out one final possession from the seasoned Kansas squad. The Jayhawks ran a crafty staggered screen action to free Brown at the top of the key for the potential game-tying triple. The senior wing rose up for what felt like an eternity before his shot met every bit of iron. The ball was batted around before being swatted out near half-court by Rosado as the final buzzer pierced the thunderous arena noise. Bedlam ensued as FAU players piled atop each other at midcourt in their biggest human mosh pit since childhood. May stood triumphantly with his fists pumped, having now led his squad to the unthinkable, the program's first ever Final Four in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. "We've been down and counted out so many times before, so just another day at the office for this group, to be honest," he shouted over the roars. "Their tenacity and perseverance, I'm just so damn proud of them. A journey for the ages." The college basketball world was officially infatuated with Florida Atlantic and their storybook tournament run to the Final Four. Their grit, toughness, experience, and heart won over millions of admirers through those 2 thrilling Elite Eight victories. When the Owls arrived in Houston, the fanfare and crazed atmosphere followed. FAU supporters'